Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Esteem a New Woman. The devilish diva starts on the road to becoming a new creature in Christ in this all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem a New Woman at Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, because we're having us a barbecue. The folks behind the hashtag DCSoWhite have decided to escalate their campaign into a DC blackout 1,200 days after the cancellation of the last DC main continuity series featuring a black character. Now, the folks behind the hashtag DCSoWhite express their frustration regarding DC Comics' lack of action 1,200 days after the cancellation of I Am Batman, the last DC Comics series to feature a black character in the main DC universe, by escalating things into what they call a DC blackout, which is supposed to be a boycott of all DC Comics for black nerds and black comic fans, as related to looking to take more action to get DC Comics to go out here and make a series featuring one of its characters in its main continuity. This ain't a boycott, this is just bad comedy. And it's bad comedy because it's just so mind-bogglingly stupid to believe that going out here and boycotting DC Comics will persuade the new owners of DC Comics, Larry and David Ellison, to be persuaded to launch a new series featuring one of DC's black characters from its main continuity, when this whole boycott basically makes no sense, because you're talking about boycotting an entire company in order to get them to launch a book that basically they've done for the last 40 years that has not sold, and you want to think that by boycotting this company, this will persuade DC Comics to go out here and continue publishing a book that basically has not sold in large enough numbers to consider keeping said book in print. Now, what further compounds the mind-boggling stupidity is not only do they want DC Comics to go out here and launch a new series in its main continuity featuring one of its black characters, they also want DC Comics to go out here and also maintain keeping said series in print for 18 months. So what they believe is that if you keep the book in print for 18 months, eventually the book will find an audience. And when they make this type of statement, it basically tells me that these guys basically don't know anything about the business of publishing, because in the business of publishing, where 90% of books fail, most publishers basically don't keep anything in print for long because they can't afford to keep it in print. And what these guys like your Captain Diesel's Dojo and your Blurred Without Fear want to do is try to use a boycott to persuade DC Comics to go out here and look to spend more money on a book featuring a black character after they've taken huge losses on multiple books over the last 2 decades. I mean, I can count up the titles that DC Comics has basically taken losses on. I mean, just recently they have taken losses on the entire Milestone 2.0 run, and before that they took losses on a Cyborg book, and before that they took losses on a Firestorm book. And what these guys want to believe is that DC Comics is supposed to go out here and basically continue launching these series, even though they've gone out here and again continue to launch these series such as I Am Batman, such as Milestone 2.0, such as the Cyborg book, such as the Firestorm book, and many other titles. I mean, how many losses does a company have to take before they basically realize that there's not enough of an audience to be able to sustain a book? That's a critical question I would like to ask your Blurred Without Fear and your Captain Diesel's JoJo, as someone who's been in the publishing business for 18 years and basically has sat there and taken said losses as related to many books on my own SJS Direct imprint, as someone who's gone out here and taken those losses on many of my books. How many losses does a company have to take before they basically realize that there is no audience out here, like many people say? Now, as I watched their videos, they sat there and talked about, how black books sell, when I basically have just already made a video showing with my own books how many of these black books basically don't really sell and don't really sell very quickly. And when it comes down to a company like DC Comics, they want to see the numbers. And as I listen to these guys talk about how the sales are generated, it was a whole bunch of gobbledygook that made no logical sense. Now, according to these guys, black comics basically sell, but the way they would count sales makes no sense to a publisher like myself. Now, when it comes down to me, what I look for as related to sales is I look directly at my royalty reports that come straight from places like Amazon, Draft to Digital, and the Nielsen Bookscan, and I showed everyone that in a previous video. But these guys, they believe that sales numbers aren't really counted by a person going to the store. No, what they've come up with is one overcomplicated way to show stores that books get sold, but that whole process doesn't really get the basic casual customer to come in the comic shop. And when it comes to the black customer, it's hard to get them even to go to a Barnes & Noble or a vendor table. But these guys want to say, if you want to show how a black comic is sold, you need to go to one of the few 300 remaining comic shops in the United States. You need to go out here and create a pull list, put in a pre-order for a book, and plain and simple, ain't nobody got time for that shit. No, nobody got time for that bullshit where you're going out here doing a Google search, looking for one of these comic book stores. Then what you're doing is, after you try to find this comic shop, if you live in a rural area, you got to go out here, spend money on gas to go drive to that place. Or if you live in an area like I do here in New York City, you got to go out here and take a ride on a train or a ride on the bus to another neighborhood. And then after you do all that, then you got to go to said comic shop and put in a pre-order to show how this book is selling. Plain and simple, the average casual customer ain't got no time for that bullshit. No, when it comes to the casual customer, if they don't see it on a shelf or they don't see it on an Amazon page, they ain't thinking about buying that. And these guys want to say this is the actual way you show comic publishers how sales are generated, because when it comes to the comic book market and its dysfunctional business model, they basically count books as being sold when they come to the comic book store. And that's not really sales, because that means the comic shop bought the book. It did not mean the customer bought the book. And if the customer isn't buying the book, then you don't know who the readers are. And that's what's completely fucked up about the entire comic book business. And these guys want to talk about how this is how sales are generated, when that's not how sales are generated at all. No, when it comes to sales, sales are generated by the customer coming to buy the book. And when the customer comes to buy the book, you don't tell the customer where to buy the book. The customer will buy the book where they want to buy the book. And according to these guys, a sale on Amazon isn't considered a sale. And that in and of itself shows how completely disconnected from reality these dudes are, because 90% of your customers are gonna come from Amazon, because that's where the casuals and average everyday person is. That's what I basically understood when, after I did my John Haynes at Death Store Kickstarter, I basically said to myself, I got to put this book on Amazon, and I couldn't get the paper version up because there's issues with the PDF, but I do have the paper version on Lulu, but I have the digital version on Amazon and Google Play, because that's where most of the customers are. And if you're not where the customers are, you're not going to generate any sales. But these guys want to believe that they can convince DC Comics to go out here and launch a series with a boycott of DC Comics, and launch this boycott because their hashtag DC So White got no traction, and that whole DC So White thing got no traction because basically when it comes down to DC Comics, they see where most of their sales are coming from, and 71% of their sales are basically coming from white male comic fans. And when it comes down to the black comic fan, basically they, like I've said before, they don't show up in large enough numbers to basically show how they are a base. And if you don't show up in large enough numbers, basically no publisher out here is going to take you seriously. No, they're not going to take you seriously because they don't see the numbers. And with the all overcomplicated process for trying to generate numbers, it's hard for any publisher to basically see the numbers as related to black nerds and black comic fans, who I'm seeing basically make up less than 0.5%. So you're basically going to ask DC Comics to go out here and spend millions of dollars over a course of 18 months on a book that basically many people are not going to buy in the first place as related to the core base of comic fans out here. And then you're going to tell them that they need to continue spending money on said book until it finds an audience. And as a publisher, I have to say that that's just complete bullshit, because no publisher is going to keep looking to keep spending money on a book that doesn't sell in a business where 90% of books fail. No publisher like myself is going to keep looking to keep a book in print and continue paying the cost, such as the cost for the art, which I went over in a previous video. Again, you want somebody to spend $200 a page on a book. You want somebody to spend $150 to $200 on colors on each page on a book, $20 to $140 on letters on this book. And you want me to do this over a year and a half, 18 months, all the while all these costs are piling up. I'm taking losses on not only the cost of production, but taking losses on printing all these books that the shops aren't ordering. That's what these guys basically are going to say is what they believe a company needs to do for a book to discover an audience. And as a publisher, I can tell you from my own experience, again, no publisher is going to do that, because when it comes to trade publishing, again, they pull the plug on a book in 6 months. And when it comes down to comic publishers, there is a point where they basically have to pull the plug because they can't keep taking their losses. Now, a print-on-demand publisher like myself, I can possibly afford to be generous to a point and keep a book in print longer because it's print on demand, but the overall initial cost that's going to keep me from looking to, again, continue to keep a book in print because, again, it's the production costs that basically wind up eating you up. And eventually you look at the numbers as related to the money and you realize, hey, I can't keep spending this money if these folks don't show up. And that's the problem with many comics that feature black characters. Yeah, they might have a number one that does pretty good sales, or those empty symbolic power books at DC Comics, like with the push for the new history of the DC Universe Dakota incident. Yeah, that might do well in the beginning, but when we're talking about ongoings, we're talking about a book taking on a lot of costs. And eventually what happens with even most major comic characters these days is you'll get a number one issue bump and then the book drops like a rock. So you want a company to go out here and basically keep taking losses on a book, so that there can be a black book, even though many of the companies like DC Comics have put out books for years. Like I said before, we had Milestone 2.0, we had, again, the I Am Batman book, we had the Cyborg book, the Firestorm book, Black Lightning books. Again, we've had books put out here, and again, how much money can a company, again, lose before they have to realize that, again, while people say they want these books, they're not showing up for the books, and you're telling me that these books are selling. Well, if these books are selling, one of the things I know as a publisher, if a book is selling, I'm going to see those numbers. I'm going to see the numbers, and it's not going to be with some, gobbledygooky plan talking about pre-orders. I'm going to hear from the shop owners saying, hey, give me some more of this. Hey, I want to know that this book is available. And again, these guys also want to say it's advertising. Well, again, I've done advertising and people just pass that stuff by. So it's not just advertising. There's a clear, again, cognitive dissonance, especially when it comes to black people in books. This is something I've known as related to personal experience from going to places like the Harlem Book Fair. Watch folks basically completely ignore me over the course of 2 years. I know that when it comes down to many black folks, they'll say one thing, but when it's time to spend the money, they're not seen. And there comes a point when a company basically is going to look at the numbers and realize, hey, we can't keep producing this product. We can't keep producing this product because there's no audience there. And if we can't, and again, it doesn't matter how long we put it out, there's no audience there. And you basically can't keep spending money, good money after bad. And that's what many of these guys like your Blurred Without Fear, your Captain Diesel's dojo don't understand. They don't understand that DC Comics, they listened to your hashtag and did not care. And again, I thought that DC Comics was making plans to make these guys a book. I mean, I saw through that completely. I saw through that BS completely because, again, as someone who's been in publishing, I know that usually these books that you see today were basically planned a year in advance. So I knew that whole talk that Blurred Without Fear was saying, oh, they're working on a series. No, they're not working on a series because they've basically seen the losses that they've taken. They see the losses that Marvel basically took when they did the all new, all different Marvel. They see all those losses that they've been taking, no different than what a guy told me who was working at Holloway House back in 1998. He told me when I was trying to get John Haynes published, basically, they don't do books that feature black male characters because black people don't come out for books featuring black male characters. And I didn't want to believe him until just about recently, where I had a 2-year sales slump that basically was one of the things that led to me having a heart attack because I was dealing with so much stress trying to get black people to pick up one of these books that I have here on the SJS Direct imprint. Again, I've seen personally, again, people sit there and say, oh, I want positive stories. I want this and that, but don't show up at all. And these guys are still sitting up here in La La Land saying, oh, these books sell. No, these books, if they sold, again, DC Comics would have incentive to do them. Comic shops would have incentive to order them. But there comes a point where a publisher has to realize, hey, this ain't making me no money. I got a limited budget and I gotta print the books that go out here and sell because, again, I'll repeat it once more. For those who are dense out here, 90% of these books go out here and fail. And a company reaches a point where they get tired of hearing, oh, just hang in there. No, we can't hang in there because we ain't seeing the money. And when it comes down to, again, DC Comics, it's not really the people who now own DC Comics ain't in a position to listen. No, they're not in a position to listen. Now, the old regime basically could have listened. That was completely, again, when it was Warner Brothers Discovery. But Warner Brothers has now been sold to the Ellisons, and the Ellisons, Larry and David Ellison, are Trump supporters, and those Trump supporters, basically, they looking to go out here and make comics featuring white males, and when they go and talk to these guys like Blurred Without Fear and Captain Diesel's dojo, what they're gonna do is go out here and spout the same reports that I just talked about. They're gonna say, hey, we've got the reports that show us that these books don't go out here and sell. And you want me to go out here and print thousands of copies, take losses on these books, even though we have records of these books not selling. And there comes a point where a company, again, looks at people and says, hey, we went in here, we invested the money, we invested the resources, we invested the time. And when you talk about boycotting a company over a product you're not buying, that's where that company's folks look at you with a side eye and stop taking you seriously. And they stop taking you seriously because you're sitting here and telling me you're going to boycott me over a product you don't buy. And that's where the logic stops making sense and everything starts to sound coming out your mouth like someone who just was a part of Arkham Asylum. I mean, this is some Arkham certified logic if I ever heard it. I mean, even the Joker would look at this and say it's completely insane. You want to boycott a company for not producing a book that you basically would not buy over the course of several years, and you want to believe said boycott will have an impact, and that in and of itself is one of the most insane things I have ever heard in my life. And I, again, am a publisher out here, and it's mind-bogglingly stupid to me. You want to boycott a company over something you didn't buy, and you want to demand said company make product that you haven't bought, and you want the same person who's on the average everyday person on the street to go to a place that possibly is hard for them to get to put in order to show sales. Again, what type of Arkham certified logic is this at all? Another critical question I want to ask these dudes behind this whole campaign regarding this boycott, which basically is going to fall on deaf ears with Larry and David Ellison if those two racists aren't laughing right now, because they look at this whole campaign and see it as completely Arkham certified and completely insane. I mean, if you want to talk about basic economics is supply and demand. And again, companies supply what the customer demands, but if the customer does not show up in any sort of large numbers to create a base, then the customer can't complain when the producer does not produce said product, because a company needs to see the numbers at the end of the day. A company like my own, we got to see the numbers, and we got to see the numbers in something that's completely measurable in real time, like what I myself do with the Amazon royalty reports, with the Draft to Digital royalty reports, with the Google Play royalty reports, with the Nielsen Book Scan reports. I can look at those numbers in real time and see what's selling over the course of a month. But these guys want us to go out here and play a complicated hodgepodge of, I don't know what type of calculus they talking about. Oh, you go to the comic shop, you put in the pre-order, that's going to show the publisher. No, nobody's going to go through all of that nonsense. No. Nobody's going to go through all that to say, oh, this black book is selling. I mean, even Terry McMillan with Waiting to Exhale didn't go through all that. She basically went out here, got her books printed, went out here and did seminars, did shows. And again, that's how she has her numbers. Same with me. I have the numbers and I can show what is selling and what's not selling. I mean, and you're sitting there saying, oh, I want this series. But if I don't see the numbers, again, as a publisher, I'm telling you, if I don't see the numbers, I'm not going to keep this in print. No, I'm going to just go out here and charge that book to the game, keep it pushing, because in publishing, again, where you have 90% of the books fail, you got to focus on the 10% that are moving. And the only time you have is to deal with those books that are the ones that move. And when you hear somebody talking about a boycott, again, you look at it and go, how am I supposed to take you seriously if you basically have not shown me how you're going to impact my sales? I mean, basically, these publishers now have over 10 to 12 years of data that basically show how they don't need to take you seriously. They have on the Marvel side, all new, all different Marvel, basically crashing and burning. They have all of these DC titles from Milestone 2.0 crashing and burning. They have the I Am Batman book crashing and burning. They have many of these other books, again, just falling out of sales. And you want to tell me that you want, after 1,200 days of there not being a DC book, you're going to escalate hashtag DC so white to shame them into getting into a covert contract to launch a series that you're going to go and have this whole other campaign as related to, again, this whole DC blackout. Well, I'm shining a light on this blackout, and I can tell you it's going to have no impact on those 71% of white customers who basically are just going to keep buying their DC books. And it's not going to have an impact when, again, there's only 0.0001 of 0.0001.5% of black customers. Again, this boycott has no impact outside of basically making a lot of noise, because it doesn't really show how black spending power has any impact. And the way black comic fans can show their impact is not by complaining about DC Comics, but by supporting independent comic publishers like myself, who create great black books that basically people don't, like this Captain Diesel and Blur Without Fear, pay absolutely no attention to. I mean, these guys are sitting up here begging DC for a series when you've got many independent publishers like myself spending money trying to get and build an audience for original black characters and trying to turn black original characters into IPs. These guys are still sitting up here begging the establishment for something tangible that, again, they have no interest in, because DC basically, ever since about the 1970s, these are the guys who came up with the Brown Bomber, a racist who turns into a black superhero, until this other guy came in with Black Lightning. And again, Black Lightning got canceled in the DC implosion. So you're sitting up there begging DC to give you scraps from the table when there's people like me trying to give you fresh flowing water, like the late David Carroll has said. Here's a path of fresh flowing water, but you still want to go over here and get this garbage over here. And it just, again, boggles my mind. But this is the spellbound mindset of the black nerd and the black comic fan. Again, they are looking for white acceptance. They're looking for white approval. And that they don't understand that the only way to gain, again, empowerment is by supporting your own people. But they would rather, again, like I said before, light their money on fire rather than support a black publisher. They would rather go out here and light that money on fire and look to, again, try to maintain this codependency with this DC Blackout that racists like Larry and David Ellison, basically, they shining a light on this and laughing at it. Because these are the same people who basically, again, they don't care about anything black, and they don't care about anything black, but these guys think that their escalation is going to have an impact when their escalation is going to be just as ignored as the hashtag DC So White campaign. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, is available on Lulu.com in paperback, and it's also available on Amazon's Kindle, and it's also available on Google Play. And you can also find my other comic, Esteem No Good Deed, on Amazon.com for just 99 cents. And these folks can't even find 99 cents to support a comic. And it's also available in the Esteem series book, Esteem Blast from the Past. And if you want to also check out many of the books on the SJS Direct imprint and that feature positive images of black people and black action and adventure, you can go out here and pick up those books like the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and Spinsterella series, and my vampire novel, Eternal Night. And many of those books, I would have turned them into comic books, but I just could not get the money together. And again, you can help me to get to the world to my next comic by going out here and picking up those books. And you can also help out because I go out here and support many independent comic artists by putting their art on my covers. And the way you can also help out is by dropping a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, An Offer He Can't Refuse. The man who rules the world gets a job offer he can't refuse in this action-packed all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, An Offer He Can't Refuse at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Runway of Doom. The goddess next door struts her stuff on the catwalk to take on a runway of rogues in this action-packed all-new ISIS series adventure. Get your copy of ISIS, Runway of Doom at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.